Shalom. Welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us in what I promise you will be a very, very interesting and enlightening and I hope thought-provoking conversation. We appreciate your time. If you'd like to make a comment about the show or a suggestion, feel free to email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. Obviously, that's the website, Jewish Sacred Aging. Visit us on the Facebook page, Jewish Sacred Aging, and all the usual stuff. You know what to do. We are very, very delighted to welcome to today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, Rabbi John Rosove, the author of this very, very interesting and exciting book, Finding Your Moral Compass, subtitled Jewish Values for the 21st Century. We need several of them right now. John, welcome. It's a bi-coastal show. We're in the East Coast. You're in Los Angeles. So welcome. Thank you for getting up a little earlier and coming on. So how are you feeling today?
I'm fine. I've been up for hours. I wake up very early in the morning. I wake up when the East Coasters are waking up, usually between 4 and 5 a.m. And then I walk and do what I have to do.
Oh,
and here I am. So I'm wide awake.
It's almost dinner time now for you.
Really.
Finding your moral compass. First of all, let me suggest to my colleagues, our colleagues who may be listening or watching this or directors of education, get a hold of the book. Think about this for a confirmation class curriculum, because I think you could be doing our teenagers a big service with this book. Anyway, I think the absolutely first question that I have to ask you is, I want you to define what you mean by moral compass.
We live in an age where it's kind of like the fish is stinking from the head in our politics, and not only here in the United States, but in Israel and around the world. And many people have lost the sense of their moral core, what they grew up with in their homes, in their synagogues, in their churches, in their mosques, in many different venues. And I have found that the more we are exposed to corruption in the environment, the more things start to become normal, which maybe even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, were not at all normal. So this title was actually given to the book by my publisher at the University of Toronto, New Jewish Press. I gave a different title, which I don't even remember what it was, but she said, this is really what the book is about, Finding Your Moral Compass, Jewish Values for the 21st Century. So I said, sounds good to me, and I trusted her. She accepted the book. I wrote to her, and she accepted the book almost immediately, which is not normal to get a book published. It's hard to get books published.
Yes.
And so and she said, we need this now. In Canada, too, as I found. And so the entire environment in North America and around the world is suffering from a lack of clarity, I think. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, there's a definite lack of clarity. I mean, just all you have to do is travel or read the international press, and you'll see that some of the core values that you're talking about are not only under attack here in North America, but various places around the world. And so we can get this out of the way first. It's available at the usual places where people get their books, either electronically or in a physical bookshop, correct?
It depends. Well, the University of Toronto Press has a very good marketing department. I don't know where it is in bookstores, but it's available on Amazon, and it's available through the University of Toronto New Jewish Press, at the very least.
Okay.
And it could be elsewhere as well.
You play around in the beginning with the number 4. Yeah, and 4 and 40, and we're 40 years in the will, blah, blah, what's the significance to you of that number?
Well, I wanted to quote someone who once said that the number 4 and multiples thereof is a number of completion and wholeness, but I couldn't find the source. So I just said, this is a number of wholeness, of completeness. And as I said in the introduction, I listed a lot of different numbers of multiples thereof in Jewish tradition, from the 40 days of the flood, the 40 days on which Moses spent on the mountain, receiving Torah, the 400 years of slavery, which wasn't that long, but that's a traditional number. The 4 cups of wine at the Seder, the 4-letter name of the most holiest name of God, Yud He Vav He, the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 quarters of the old city of Jerusalem. And if you take them all together, the 4 directions, the 4 elements and so forth. And I thought that that was a convenient number to choose 40 values. But there's so many more values than that. And, but I made a choice as to what 40 values based on what I thought were foundational for living a moral, Jewish, and a meaningful life.
A lot of people will say, to live a normal, a quality mitzvah-oriented life, you're a mensch. So one of the questions as I read through the book, I wrote down the question, does menschlichkeit equal having a moral compass?
I think so. That's why it's after faith, which is the first chapter. Menschlichkeit is the second chapter, because I thought that the faith tradition that we are a part of, whether you believe in God or not, there is a sense of, and there were really 3 overwhelming values that I was conscious of when choosing these 40. The idea that we are all created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, according to the book of Genesis, which means that we're all equal. We all have infinite value and worth. Then there's the unity principle, which is found in the Shema, that we are all part of oneness. And for the Jewish people, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'Zeh, we are all responsible for our people. And those 3 overwhelming values were the 3 that I went from. But Menschlichkeit was a close second to faith itself. And even if you're an atheist or an agnostic, the value of being a mensch, which is what I was told from the earliest times I can remember. My parents said, be a mensch. And I understood what that meant, because everything else they taught me also flowed from that concept.
So you begin with faith, and in the section that's in every chapter of questions, comments to think about, and resources, you have this quote from Jonathan Sacks, Oliver Sholem, about faith being taking a risk, that faith should not be static. It's a great quote. Talk to me about what you think he meant and how you interpret the idea of faith not being static.
Well, he also reflected what Heschel said, that faith was a radical venture, that even if you don't know what the consequences of what you are going to do is, but if you operate from the basis of that there is something holistic, decent, moral, and you come up across a movement, a personality in one's personal life or in one's political life, there has to be this sense of being able to strike out and not be intimidated by the bullies of the world, which is really what the United States is dealing with right now. And also Israel is dealing with on another level, as elections are coming up for both of us. And so I think Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Sacks, Oliver Sholem, was really talking about that. But he's an Orthodox rabbi, and he was a, world-class intellectual, and he died way too young. He was 71 years old. I'm now 76, and I can't imagine what we lost because of his early death, because he was a giant as a public intellectual. It's a great loss to the Jewish world, to the non-Jewish world. But I think what he was talking about was, because he also spoke with everyone across the faith traditions and was respected and beloved as a consequence. I think if we have integrity, and that's part of what the faith tradition's about, we can relate to everybody on that basis out of respect, kavod, and humility, and a sense of decency and mutual respect. I think that's what he was talking about.
I always reflect when I teach this also on Lech Lecha, and this idea that faith is, we're all going to a future. We all are going into a future which we do not know. And that element of faith, that's why I was intrigued that I wanted to ask you about that. The fact that we can teach that faith is not static. It's not passive. It's very active, which I think is a particularly Jewish approach that ties in with the Menschlichkeit type of stuff. Many of us have role models, people who help transform our life. You pay particular homage to Lenny Bierman in some beautiful words that you write in the book. Could you just take a couple of minutes and say how this man influenced you?
Right. So I've had a lot of mentors in my life, but Rabbi Leonard Bierman was my childhood rabbi at Leobeck Temple in Los Angeles. And I knew him from afar, and he was as courageous a reform rabbi as there was in the United States in those years. He talked about Vietnam when no one knew where it was on the map. He was an anti-nuclear activist before most of us understood what that meant. He was an interfaith leader beloved by Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities, although it was a very controversial figure. And so he represented to me the embodiment of courage and eloquence. When I was already a rabbi and writing a blog, he found my blog and liked what I was writing, and he reached out to me, and I thought, wow, this is an opportunity. He was in his late 80s at that point. And so he and I began having lunch together every couple or 3 months. And they were long lunches with lots of stories. And he always said to me, John, you make me feel young again. And I said to him, Leonard, you make me feel worthy to be a rabbi. And was always a standard against which I measured myself. And he also gave me courage, because I always felt if Leonard Bierman could be saying the things that I wanted to say, then there must be something kosher about it. And so often I would make considered statements in the Los Angeles Jewish community and San Francisco and Washington, D.C., where I was serving. And not always to the happiness of my communities. But I knew that what I was doing was in the line of what Leonard represented to me as truly a prophetic leader. So he meant a great deal to me and to many, many other people, many rabbis, many Muslim leaders, and many Christian leaders. So he was a great, great example to me.
He was one of these people who spoke, as the cliche now goes, truth to power. And it's a gift. It's a great gift to have somebody like that. You write about truth in the book, in the world of where people get their news and truth from TikTok. It's a very, very interesting chapter. You quote the Midrash about the conversation before the creation of the world, and God throws truth down to the earth. Could you talk about that section about truth and what that Midrash means?
Right. Well, the truth is a very hard thing to grasp. Truth with a capital T is not really accessible to any of us. So there's absolute truth, and then there are relative truths. And the challenge for each of us is to be able to understand our own truths, but to mix it with the idea of shalom, peace. So truth is very hard. It's absolute. It's rigid. And if you want to live in a world of truth, get ready for war. I often ask my confirmation students, what's the opposite of truth? And they would say, lies. And I said, yeah, that's true, but it's also peace. Because if you want peace, get prepared for war. If you want peace, which is much more soft and compromising, you have to get ready for compromise. So on the one point, we need to understand who we are and what is our individual truth, but it's with a small t. And then if we want to live in the world, we have to be able to mix truth and peace together. And that's the great challenge. That's what I tried to demonstrate in that one chapter.
So to you, John, Rabbi Rosove, is there to you truth with a capital T?
It's inaccessible to me. The great mystic sages of Sfat in the 17th century who developed the higher realms, the midot of the higher realms, Chokhmah and Keter and Bina, understanding and compassion and crown, were even inaccessible to the highest levels of mystic sages. And I see truth as up there. I don't know complete truth. It's not an accident. And in my congregation in Los Angeles, Temple Israel of Hollywood, above our ark, it's written, Dalif me miata omed, know before whom you stand, which means you are a frail and imperfect being. The only perfect being is Elohim, is Yud He Vav He. And we have to show humility and be conscious that there are many truths in the world possessed by many peoples. And so my truth, whenever I would preach or teach on a matter that I knew was controversial, because there were multiple truths, I did my very best to understand what the truths of the other was, which was one of the great lessons that Hillel, the great sage of the first century before the Common Era, and the disciples who followed him taught, that though the halakha, the Jewish law, always followed Hillel, his interlocutor was Shammai, but they always mentioned Shammai's opinion before they even mentioned Hillel's opinion, because the minority view has validity and needs to be understood. There was a great controversy in our congregation about 20 years ago, before 9/11, had to do with the Boy Scouts of America. And we had a Cub Scout troop meeting at our congregation, and several were in the middle of Hollywood. And so a lot of gay and lesbian members of the community. And one gay man came to me whose children were in our day school, our elementary school. And he said, John, I see this was when Boy Scouts of America said that any individual who's gay cannot be a scout leader and they'll be fired. And he was very upset by that, obviously, as I was. And he said, you have a Cub Scout troop in your congregation. So I said, that's true. And he said, this is a bad message to my children. So I took it to our president at the time, whose brother was gay. And there was no daylight between the two of us. We knew we had to bring this before the board. The gay group, Cub Scout group, had been meeting in our community for many years. And we voted as a board unanimously to discontinue that relationship. But the kids were our members. And some of the parents of our kids were really insulted. We're not homophobic. Let the kids finish. But we made the decision, no. So there was a congregational meeting, the Reform movement. We brought in leadership of the Reform movement to monitor this vote. There were hundreds of people who came, and everybody spoke. And at the end, I said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. These and those are the words of the living God. After the decision was made that we would discontinue the Cub Scout troops, and though we lost a few members in doing that, but we gained members as well, because people came to us and said, this is the kind of community we want to be a part of. And eventually, at least one of the people who left, he came back because he knew that we were trying to do what was moral and right. And he wasn't a homophobe at all, but he loved the Boy Scouts of America because it saved him when he was a kid. So, there are many truths. We have to be respectful of the truths of the other, but not give up our moral principles once we figure out what they are.
Truth is rarely easy, and as you were talking, one of the first things that flashed in my mind is, of course, in the golem, the mythology, maybe mythology of the golem. What was that was on the forehead of the golem was emet, which is truth. You write about wisdom, and you have this wonderful little sentence, which I wanted to ask you too about. You're reflecting upon, I think, teaching, probably may have been in your confirmation class, is that I told kids that the reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth is so that we will listen more and talk less. That's in your section on Chochmah, wisdom. How do you apply that now? Because, boy, you could just take the front page of any newspaper, if people even read them anymore, and say, 2 ears, 1 mouth, what's the message?
That's why it's important to have good leaders, people who are modest in temperament, who speak the truth, who are not liars, who have humility, who are concerned about the best interests of the people they lead. And even the critical mind of one's followers are very, very important. We have to be able to listen to what are the fundamental needs of the people who follow us. And often they become our teachers at the same time, and they are leaders in their own right. That's what I discovered throughout my congregational life, which my wife tells me was one of the reasons I was successful, is that I did listen. And I grew up listening to great figures like Leonard Bierman, like Richard Levy, another one of my childhood rabbis, Sanford Reagan's, another one of my childhood rabbis. And I had wonderful teachers at the Hebrew Union College. And there are great figures everywhere, thank goodness, where we can learn from them and in our own study and reading, learning of Jewish sources, of Christian sources too. And it's so Chochmah comes from everyone. I told the story in the book about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was in a hospital one day and she was counseling a dying man of cancer, but she wasn't reaching him. And one night she came back to speak with him. His door was open and he heard him speaking from the heart in ways that she was not able to get him to speak to her. And she wondered who he was talking to because she couldn't see the person from her position in the hallway. And at the end, a black woman, older woman, cleaning lady, came out. And Kubler-Ross said, "How did you get that man to speak to you in the way that he did?" And she said, "Honey, I just sat down, I held his hand, and he knew that he could talk to me and the Lord did the rest." And to me, that was a very powerful message about listening, being willing to listen and not coming filled with our own ideas. There's a Buddhist story about this man who went to meet with the great Buddhist leader on the top of a mountain and took a long time to get there. Finally got there and he said, "Tell me your wisdom." And so he said, "Well, would you like some tea?" And he said, "Sure, I'd love some tea." So they sat on the ground and the Buddhist master started pouring him tea and kept pouring and pouring until the tea just ran out of the saucer onto the floor and he didn't stop. And the man said to him, "Why are you doing that?" He said, that tea is like you. You have so much in your head, you can't hear or listen to what is in the heart and the soul of the other. So learn to listen. I mean, I loved that story and told it many times to kids. And, so we all need to listen more. And for rabbis, and I'm one, we love to talk. So we also have to listen. And I learned that over time and sometimes the hard way. I sometimes should just shut up and listen.
So we're speaking with Rabbi John Rosove about his brand new book, Finding Your Moral Compass, Jewish Values for the 21st Century. 40 values, playing on the number 4. It covers a multitude of issues that we're dealing with, honoring teachers, welcoming the stranger, specific to Jewish sacred aging, honoring parents and caring for the elderly. John, towards the end of the book, you talk about the importance of Israel, what's going on with Israel. Obviously, it's something that's passionate about you. Very recently, you wrote in one of the listservs, rabbinic listservs, about something called aspirational Zionism. Before we start running out of time, because this is so powerfully relevant today, because this issue is really just gnawing at the fabric of our American Jewish community. Talk to me about that final section in the book and your own soul and your neshama, and what is aspirational Zionism?
Well, first of all, let me just say my Zionist passions goes to my early childhood. My great-granduncle, my grandmother's uncle, was a great figure in the early years of the settlement, made Aliyah from Lithuania in 1880. Avram Shapira was his name. I met him when I was 6 years old in 1956. He came to visit our family in Los Angeles, and my grandmother was there. He spoke no English. He spoke Yiddish and Arabic and Russian and some Hebrew, but he didn't speak to us. He spoke to us in Yiddish, and my grandmother translated. But he was the Shomer of Petah Tikva. So he was a very strong, powerful man, big man, as I remember him. I spent a lot of time with his nephew and niece in my year in Israel for my first year of rabbinical school before, during, and after the Yom Kippur War. And I learned stories about him. So that carried me through, and it's always been a very close part of my identity as a Zionist. I am a Reform Zionist. I'm a past chair of the Association of Reform Zionists of America, and introduced me to all the institutions of the Jewish people, the Sochnut, the World Zionist Organization, Congress, and Jewish National Fund. And the term aspirational Zionism was really coined by Dr. Tal Becker of the Shalom Hartman Institute. And what he suggested is that what we need now is to return really to the roots of what Zionism was all about, which was values. What are our values as a people in our ancient land? You know, we are told tzedek tirdof, justice shall you follow. But then it says that you may be worthy to live in the land of Israel. And so often people drop the last part of the verse to justice shall you follow. So he asked many questions, which I elicited in that chapter on Zionism. But Zionism grows from Am Yisrael. We are all part of the people of Israel. And the people of Israel, our political organization, was Zionism, and now we have a state in our ancient homeland. So the challenge for Israelis and in crisis is to transcend, in my view, and for us lovers of the state of Israel and Zionists, is to be able to transcend the crisis narrative of Jewish history with which I was raised, that you cannot lose one war and survive, that the Holocaust was heavily a shadow over my growing up in the 50s and 60s and beyond. The Soviet Jewry movement I was part of as a consequence of wanting to save, a remnant of our people who were being snuffed out. Ironically, they are all right-wingers now in the state of Israel, and I'm a liberal. I'm a liberal Zionist. I'm a Reform Zionist, and aspirational Zionism, to me, is beyond politics. It's about restoring who we are as a people with a nation in a time in which we have sovereignty and power for the first time in 2,000 years. Now, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But as a Zionist, I do not walk away from my people or from the state of Israel, despite whatever is going on there. And I've spoken about it publicly. I'm not happy with what's going on at all in the West Bank and in Gaza and elsewhere. But I love my people. I love the Hebrew language. I love the land. And what Israel has accomplished is extraordinary in 80 years, almost 80 years of its existence. So aspirational Zionism, Tal Becker really articulated it beautifully. And that's why I wrote about it in this book.
Before we run out of time, the holidays, rumor has it, are coming a couple of months away. If you had an ability to just give one piece of advice to the American Jewish community in this unbelievably chaotic moment from your own neshama and values, what would it be, John?
Well, stay close to our people. Learn, continue to be activists for the good. Vote in our elections here and in Israel. If you're Israeli, vote in Israel. If you are American, vote and get everybody you know to vote to save the United States, our democracy, and stay close to the organized Jewish community that needs you. Because the synagogue is the embodiment of our tradition over 2,000 years, and we can't let it lie fallow. We need to support them.
Rabbi John Rosove, the book again, Finding Your Moral Compass, Jewish Values for the 21st Century. John, thank you very, very much.
Richard, thanks for having me.
Stay safe. Be careful on the freeways. I wish you just joy and much health. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure talking.
Pleasure. To all of you, thank you for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Again, just go check out the website, jewishsacredaging.com. There's a conveniently located donate button, and we appreciate your support. Just click on it and follow the prompts. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Media Center of Lubetkin Media in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And of course, a big shout out to our technological guru, Steve Lubetkin. Until we see each other again on the next Seekers of Meaning, please take care of yourself. And most of all, and John writes about this in the book, be kind to one another, because I think we're suffering from a real chesed deficit right now. So please be kind. Take care. Shalom.